Hello, I'm Ahron Young in Dubai and welcome to this special report. This week, as Qantas gets better connected through the United Arab Emirates, we travel to Dubai to find out what Qantas says it's discovered. Over the next half hour, we'll hear from Qantas Chief Alan Joyce and his new business partner Tim Clark at Emirates, as well as a number of Australian executives who tell us what it's really like to do business in Dubai. But we set out to put Dubai to the test for Australians.
Cheers.
We'll now be travelling through here en route to Europe. From tourism to culture, we hear from the head of Dubai Tourism, His Excellency Ahron Young.
UAE nationals are a very tolerant people.
And visit some of the best known buildings in the world. So, let's get started. Until the 1970s, Australians have been travelling to London via the Middle East for decades. Before the jet age made long-distance travel possible, the flagship Qantas Kangaroo route had to touch down at several points. But as Boeing and Airbus transformed their engines, Qantas passengers found themselves hopping down onto old empire soil in Asia. But from this week, Changi Airport is just another destination on the Qantas map, as Qantas now forges a new future here in the Middle East. In the skies above Sydney Harbour, a sight that's never been seen before. Two airlines, two A380s, and a bold image of a new alliance that might just save Qantas International. Was this do or die for the Qantas International division?
Look, one could say that. You really can't run an operation with one destination in Europe.
On board the inaugural A380 service, some passengers don't even know what the fuss is about.
Did you know you were going to be on the inaugural?
While others had to endure a rendition of
Happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you.
But it's the Qantas chief who's celebrating. After a turbulent period following the grounding of the entire Qantas fleet, this was Alan Joyce's moment, and for him, it's do or die.
He's come through it all, and this is the icing on the cake for him.
These are two very different airlines, and it's a merger of cultures, not just machinery. Right from the outset, Qantas and Emirates have been promising passengers the highest level of service and quality as part of this new alliance. But this is a brand new partnership now, and Qantas passengers will have to get used to some key differences on board. And there are differences too for passengers who are planning to stop off in Dubai. The Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade warns tourists in the UAE to exercise a high degree of caution because of the threat of terrorist attack, and be aware that local laws and penalties, including ones that appear harsh by Australian standards, do apply to you. Though every expat I speak to in Dubai refers to the city as the Las Vegas of the Middle East. They say anything goes, just don't be too obvious. Ahron Young is the Director General of the Department of Tourism. Your Excellency, there have been a number of highly publicised situations where foreigners have found themselves in trouble under UAE law. What do foreigners need to be aware of, and is Dubai a welcoming place?
A traveller coming here, as long as they respect the local customs and traditions, and as long as they respect the laws which they would be respecting in their own country, I would say they would have no problem at all and they would enjoy their time here.
Look, I actually don't see there is that much difference between the culture of Dubai and the culture of Singapore.
Of course, time will tell, but passengers planning a stopover in Dubai should be aware and seek information from DFAT before they fly. The announcement by Qantas to get into business with its former rival Emirates has created a seismic shift in the aviation world. It's a bold step, perhaps a final chance for Qantas International, depending on who you speak to. I sat down with Qantas Chief Alan Joyce inside the Emirates headquarters here in Dubai. Alan Joyce, thanks for your time.
It's great to be here, Aaron.
How important is this alliance to Qantas, and are you staking your reputation on this deal?
I think it's a very important alliance for everybody in Qantas because we knew that the international business was suffering because of the high fuel price, the high Australian dollar, and I think our people, all 35,000 of them, are customers. All 40 million people that travel with the Qantas Group every year, and our shareholders know this is a critical alliance to all of our stakeholders.
Just on Qantas International though, will this deal save that division, and are you now outsourcing Qantas International to Emirates?
Well, you know, part of this alliance is that we expand our network in Europe. That it gives us a solid foundation to build our European operations. Tim Clark has talked about our potential to fly back into continental Europe in Berlin as an example, and we see this as a good foundation for that growth to occur again. And you have to remember that Qantas still has a huge part of its operation, Qantas Domestic, Jetstar, and our frequent flyer business that are very profitable and are still growing. It's our international division that's been suffering in recent times.
Let's talk about the bottom line. What are your predictions for Qantas International? When will it be back in the black?
We think the international division will get to break even in financial year 15. We're on track to achieve those targets, and we're comfortable the Emirates Alliance is a big step in getting us to that break-even position.
I know a lot's been said on this issue in past weeks, but will Jewish passengers, will gay passengers, will passengers in de facto relationships feel safe here in Dubai?
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of talk being made about Dubai, and I think if you're here, you find that it's a very welcoming place, that people are very friendly. But the laws in every country that Qantas flies to are different, the customs are very different. And we ask people to make sure that they do full research on it. That's no different from other places we fly today in terms of some of the regulations that exist here. There are 2 million Australians already, before Qantas operations started, that go through Dubai every year. There are 60 million people from all around the world that travel through Dubai every year, from over 200 different countries. There are in fact 16,000 Australians that live here, and I know a lot of them. And they have absolutely no problem and no issues with living and transferring through this airport.
Qantas is an iconic Australian company. Let's for a second forget that you're an airline. What does this say about Australian business now that you're moving away from Asia and towards the Middle East?
Well, I think we believe that this is allowing us to both independently focus on Europe through Dubai, the Middle East and Africa through Dubai, and Asia separately in its own right. We were saying until recently that the Asian schedule was a subsidiary of our European schedule. So our timings to Asia were all constructed around the timings to Europe. We think this is very important for our long-term Asian prospects and our long-term Asian growth, and this alliance has allowed us to do that.
We've spent a lot of time looking west of Australia, but what about looking east towards the United States and your relationship with American Airlines? How does it differ to the relationship you have now with Emirates, and do you think you'll increase that relationship so it mimics what you have now with Emirates?
Yeah, it's a great question. American is a very important partner for us. They've gone through a restructuring very recently, which is going to make them a lot bigger airline, probably the biggest airline in the world, and one of the most profitable airlines in the world, and they're heavily investing in their product and new aircraft, which I think is great for Australians wanting to travel to the United States.
With respect to your predecessors, do you ever get the feeling that you now have to clean up after some of the bad decisions made by your predecessors, by previous Qantas management, things like the fleet choices, not ordering the 777, or dealing with unions, or route choices? Do you ever get the sense that you are in fact the big Qantas broom?
I think anybody coming into a job has to look at where they are and where the future is. And there's, the market is being very dynamic. There's a lot of things that have happened that people couldn't have expected. And sometimes a lot of decisions, when you look back at them with 20/20 hindsight, can look like wrong decisions or bad decisions, but that's easy. We've been hard at work at it. It's a big transformation program. It's the biggest transformation program in our history, and it covers everything we've done. It covers the fleet, it covers the way we operate, the efficiencies we get, the productivity we get, the way we do maintenance, the way we do ground handling, the way we do catering, and the way we work with alliance partners. And all of that is starting to come together, seeing real benefits, I think, to our business. And that is great for, as I said, our shareholders, our employees, and for our customers. And I think Qantas will be a lot stronger airline as a consequence of this transformation than it's ever been. And we're very confident that Qantas has a long future ahead of it.
Alan Joyce in Dubai, thanks for your time.
Thanks, Aaron. Thank you for your time.
Long before Qantas decided to return to Dubai as its main stopover point to Europe, thousands of Australians have been arriving here looking for new opportunities for employment and also for business. There is a massive expat community of Australians living here, and a number of Aussie businesses have decided to roll the dice and expand their brands in Dubai. But they warn it is not a simple ride, and you have to be prepared for a lot of paperwork initially, a lot of red tape as well. But they all agree that despite the challenges, they'll never look back. It's no secret Dubai wants to shake its reputation as a city built on oil. It wants to transform into a future based on financial services and tourism. And it's that bold ambition that's provided opportunity for hundreds of thousands of professionals from around the world, including Australian businesses. But it's by no means an easy ride.
It's daunting when you first get into business here. But once you understand the way the system works, understand the people and the culture of doing business here, it opens up very quickly.
I'm standing inside a grocery store which looks rather Australian. If you live in Sydney, Melbourne or Adelaide, then you may be familiar with Jones the Grocer. But this is Dubai, and this is a company that recognised the possibilities in the United Arab Emirates long before Qantas did. Unib Siddiqui is the local CEO of Jones the Grocer, a store that prides itself on a reliable experience for its customers wherever they are.
There isn't always a latent labour force here of the sort that you expect in the F&B industry, so we've got to work twice as hard to find the right people we employ.
Given it rains 4 times a year in the middle of the desert, you might think that procuring fresh produce would be close to impossible.
I can buy probably more produce quite often than I can in some of the other cities in the world.
While retail is maturing, wholesale has now entered its teenage years, and it seems Dubai can't get enough of Australian meat. Red meat exports to the Middle East North Africa region increased 23% between 2011 and 2012, and over the past 5 years it's rocketed by 32%. Prime Gourmet is the butcher here in Dubai for Aussie beef and lamb, including Australian Wagyu, then there's grain-fed Angus beef and also Victorian lamb. But it's the famous Aussie sausages that the locals and the expats have come to love.
The price point was always an important factor. However, quality price today is taking over.
Meat and Livestock Australia says increased demand for chilled and frozen meats in the UAE has now forced down the price, and it's now cheaper than controversial live exports to the region.
As most markets do, they start off as live markets and they generally mature into boxed meat markets, and that's driven purely from the importers, the customers, the retailers wanting choice.
Andy Cuthbert is the chairman of the Emirates Culinary Guild. He's lived in Dubai for 2 decades. What's it like to do business here? What's it like to be an Australian expat in Dubai?
21 years, it's great. I mean, life is perfect. Blue sky every day, bit of rain twice a year, we can survive.
So a bit different to Melbourne.
Yeah, just a little bit. 4 seasons in one day. Here we have 1 season every year, you know, it's always hot.
Ian Johnston came to Dubai to work for the Dubai Financial Services Authority, which oversees the Dubai International Financial Centre. He is now the chief executive.
The regulation is much the same as you would see in Australia, the UK, Europe or Hong Kong. You know, we benchmark ourselves to international standards and best practice.
Ian says there's plenty of reasons to be in Dubai.
Geographically, you're in the centre of the world, so at 5 or 6 hours flying one direction and you're in Europe, 5 or 6 hours in the other direction and you're in Asia.
And if you can't join them, beat them. Dubai offers a so-called free zone where foreign businesses can set up without having a local partner. But like everything in Dubai, you still play by their rules. Still to come, what's it like to holiday in Dubai, from giant towers to incredible hotels, and on board the Qantas A380 with the Emirates chief. We'll be back soon. Welcome back to this special presentation from Dubai. I'm Ahron Young. When Qantas chief Alan Joyce released the company's results 2 years ago, there was an audible gasp throughout the aviation world. The airline's international division and the company's pride had suffered a severe blow. After all these years, the high Aussie dollar, the high oil price, and the onslaught of foreign competition had finally taken a hold. So when Qantas chief Alan Joyce sat down with Tim Clark, the Emirates chief, on the 5th of May last year, Alan Joyce was a man with a lot to gain, up against a man with nothing to lose. On the day that the partnership was officially launched in Sydney, I spoke with Tim Clark on board a Qantas A380. Tim Clark, thanks for your time. The million-dollar question, what is in this partnership for Emirates?
A multitude of things, actually, but initially the knit of the two carriers' networks, particularly with the Emirates' access to the domestic markets of Qantas, to the commercial strength of Qantas in this part of the world, the notion that these were two very iconic carriers, particularly with the in-flight products, we knew this was going to work well together. The ability to see that the partnership would be relatively easily put together, bearing in mind that the chemistry and the DNA of both companies were very similar, particularly the management style. So we were able to I could see personally that this would be easy to do and could be achieved fairly quickly.
But Emirates already has a very good business model. Is this about increasing capacity for the company or about increasing profit?
No, I think obviously for the things I've said, we would enrich the consumer base that we have. Through enrichment, it works both ways. We would expect to see probably a better yielding business than we have today. Not that it's bad at the moment. In the commercial segments, the corporate segments, there's the business markets, etc. Qantas is much stronger in Oceania than we are, and therefore their assistance in sort of giving access to some of those segments, and equally for some of our commercial corporate segments in Europe and other places, would help them. So. And that's making sure that the value proposition doesn't change. So the consumer, the entity that we're dealing with, either as individual companies or taken together, as we will do now, remains a strong proposition.
But Emirates has a pretty strong profile in Australia. It's been building on that since it's been here. I'll point out the Melbourne Cup, for example. Will those sponsorships still happen? How will you advertise? Does Qantas and Emirates now advertise together?
Well, I think let me say that both carriers will retain their brand and their identity, and they'll chart their own courses with regard to their corporate communications aspects of whatever they're doing. I don't see the Melbourne Cup changing anything other than the Emirates Melbourne Cup as it is today. I think you will see Qantas and Emirates collateral merging, advertising collateral merging in certain places, in certain mediums, whether print media or TV or radio or whatever, at times that it suits us. But essentially, the brands have to remain separate. They are very strong brands, and we don't want to occlude either brands with the other's persona, because that's very important that they remain. Qantas is essentially an Australian icon, and they want to keep it that way, and I'm sure the Australian consumer wants to keep it that way. But hey-ho, putting the two together strengthens us and strengthens them as well.
Your opposite number at Qantas, Mr. Joyce, has really been speaking quite loudly about the difficulties that the international division of Qantas has been going through and may continue to go through. Knowing that, did you go into these negotiations, I sense, with Qantas over a barrel?
Not at all. I have to say that it was because that we could see that Qantas had progressively withdrawn from the international markets. And as a child, I used to fly Qantas a lot all over the world. I could see that we could, with the strength of Qantas, still remaining those international markets, but their focus being in other areas. And as you can see, part of the reduction in their presence in European markets is something that personally I struggled with. I could never understand why they weren't there as they always used to be, but that was their business. And I saw the opportunity almost to restore, using the Emirates brand and flight numbers, Qantas back into those markets. And what I've been quite clear about, and I said on September the 6th, that in my view that Qantas, in the next few years, when it gets its 787-9s, which have the reach to go from Australia to Dubai and onwards, would re-enter the international markets that they have the aeropolitical rights to do. And I can see that happening. So that you get a smaller aircraft, maybe 250 seats, going to Dubai and onwards to Rome or Milan or Barcelona or other points in Europe. And that's always open to them. So this wasn't one saying we're going to get one over on Qantas, we're going to restrict what they do. On the contrary, we wanted to grow the relationship, particularly to help them re-enter those markets.
We are on board an A380 now, Qantas A380 now. I know when the launch was first announced, both Emirates and Qantas did say that when it came to the differing products, you would look at what each other is doing and try and give the best of each of those. What about premium economy from an Emirates point of view? Do you think that is something that will now be introduced?
Well, in the short term, no. I think what I said was that we're pretty proud of what we do in the economy cabin. That's not to say that in the future Emirates won't have a premium economy. It's more a function of as first class demands tends to reduce and you want to keep a three-class cabin, you would have super business, premium economy and economy. So effectively you're still getting a three-class cabin. albeit without first class being as prominent as it used to be. So where we will be taking premium economy passengers from Qantas, they will be sitting in our economy cabin. But apart from seat pitch, I think probably we align in many other ways. I like to think we do.
And just finally, you're obviously not part of an alliance with One World or Star Alliance. Does this help you overcome that? Will there be other airlines that you will now be looking at for a similar relationship with Qantas? And would you now be looking to fly perhaps from Australia direct to the US, completing your around the world journey?
Well, you're talking to the wrong guy about alliances. I've not been a great advocate of alliances. I believe that if you can't do it on your own, then don't bother to do it at all. But others don't share that view. Now, when we approached Qantas, I knew they were a One World player, an important One World player, but I honestly believe that if I could make a value proposition that overarched what they were getting out of One World, this would probably be to their advantage. So I think that's what has happened. As far as us going into or considering alliances, no, we would never do that. We have a history of strong bilateral commercial relationships with other carriers at other times over other routes and other continents. So it's not a first for us with regard to what we're doing with Qantas. It's just the scale of what we're doing. We haven't done that in, and a lot of people say, well, this is basically an alliance. Well, I say, guys, call it what you like. For me, it's a partnership. It's a business relationship which enriches both companies and does the right thing by the consumer. That's all we're interested in doing. I'm not really concerned about other carriers and how they come together and trade seats and one thing and another. For me, the consumer is always first. You've got to look after the consumer, do the right thing. After all, we're all human beings. We're traveling in a closed environment over long distances. You've got to make sure you do the right thing, make them comfortable, and give them a value proposition. And I think Qantas and Emirates together both think along those lines, and that's what we're going to do.
Tim Clark, thank you.
Thank you very much.
20 years ago, Dubai wasn't much more than a small town with a big dream and a lot of money. Sadly, the charm of old Dubai wasn't enough to lure tourists from across the world. And so they started building, and they're still building. When you write a story about Dubai, use the words large and biggest in almost every sentence. Dubai is a city that wants to be noticed. It's as if every building does too. But when you land here, you get the sense that they're only halfway there, if that. But for tourists in Dubai, as I discovered, they're already well on their way. As Australian tourists, we began arriving in Dubai 15 years ago, and as the city grew higher, so too did the number of Aussies visiting Dubai. This city wants to have everything, and you've seen the brochures, so here's 10 seconds of what you can do. Okay, let's slow it down and let us start by the water. The Dubai Marina is the perfect example of why the world loves to talk about Dubai. It simply did not exist. The developers had to literally bring the waters in from the Persian Gulf, forcing open a massive waterway, literally parting the desert. And once that was done, it was time to construct some pretty incredible buildings. It's almost as if every shining tower has attention deficit disorder. They all stick out. While we've been discussing Qantas and Emirates, there's another way to fly high above Dubai. So if heights are your thing, I am standing literally on top of the world. The Burj Khalifa is the tallest man-made structure ever, the tallest in the world, 828 meters tall, which is 828 reasons not to look down. So I'm just going to keep staring at the camera. I eventually had to go because the queues were dragging on, but every New Year's Eve, this is what happens to the Burj Khalifa. It's pretty spectacular if you haven't seen the towering inferno. I kind of get the feeling that bigger is better when it comes to Dubai.
Well, Dubai, as you hopefully have seen in the last few days, is a city that has all sorts of interesting attractions for tourists. First of all, we have the best hotels in the world. Our hotels range from 3-star to 5-star but all of them are very high quality.
In terms of Dubai tourism, this is the hotel that started it all, the Burj Al Arab. It classifies itself as a 7-star hotel and it's on its own man-made island. You can't visit it unless you have a reservation. But it's at this location that I return to an earlier point about the experiences you should expect in Dubai. While filming here, I was once again stopped by undercover police. Officially though, there is no problem.
We have over 200 nationalities living and working in Dubai. The UAE nationals are a very tolerant people, and they've all grown up in this diverse multicultural environment.
Australian tourism chiefs in Dubai are also hoping for benefits from tourists coming the other way. Currently 80,000 UAE tourists arrive on Aussie shores every year.
You know, we have 12 flights a day from Emirates landing in Australia and getting onto that Qantas domestic network.
And a lot of them visit places like Sydney and Brisbane and the Gold Coast. I do think that this trend will continue.
And they believe the Qantas Emirates partnership will boost incoming tourists even further. But back in Dubai, if you enjoy classical music and like to stare at water, then you can watch this every night. And that is the program from here in Dubai. I'm Ahron Young. Thanks for watching.